All right, so I'll call to order regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen. It's January 22nd, 2019. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item is approval of minutes. There are several. There are two from the 7th and one from the 14th. Entertain a motion for. Start with the 5:30 meeting on the 7th. I'll move to approve the special meeting on January 7th.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
No? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we have the regular minutes from the 7th. They were slightly long.
Yeah.
Slightly.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of January 7th, regular meeting as written.
I'll second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And then the special meeting on the 14th.
Make a motion to accept the meeting minutes as written.
I'll second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Present to speak. Is anyone present to speak? Just identify yourself for the record and listen together to us.
Kim Coalition, 29 Lindsay Lane. So, I read the minutes from the last meeting, and I have to say that I was a little flabbergasted with the water situation. And I had a lot of questions. So first I talked to the sanitarian and I asked her, well, what happened? Because I was totally confused. And she said, and she sent me the email, so I have copies of it, that she never rejected his form, never rejected it. She did have on her notes, she wrote rejected, but then realized she made a mistake and sent an email and said that they needed more information. And then someone came in and got copies of her record, she said, and it said rejected, but it wasn't meant for him and it wasn't rejected. So there was never any rejection. They just needed to fill out more
I
paperwork.
will say that it's never been clear where he got the copy of the paper that said rejected, where she had marked rejected. They're not positive that they gave it to him.
Yeah,
He says it was sent to him, but there's no email from here to there.
right.
So it's
Yes, right. But
convoluted to say that.
But that was just a note to herself,
Correct.
is what she said. So it never was rejected. And she sent the emails, this email she sent to Steve, and
Yeah.
she sent them all to me, and nowhere does it say it's rejected.
That
So
is correct.
anyways, so anyway, so at least I understand her point. But then I read the minutes, and there was so much controversy, yet all three of you voted to do it. So I was really confused. So now I have some questions, like, and I know you have to work it all out, but who's gonna read the meter? Or who's gonna set rates? What's your water rate gonna be? And what if he doesn't pay? Or what if 2 years from now he sells it and the next person doesn't pay? How are you collecting it? And then do you have an alternate source of water or a backup plan? If the water fails, now you have a resident that we're responsible to. Do we have a backup plan? What's the town's responsibility if there's bacteria in the water? And then will you allow everybody else to hook up? Because he doesn't have a hardship, and we're allowing him to hook up without a hardship. So now anybody else who comes on the road, you have to, but we're not equipped for that as a town. And that money's coming out of our pockets eventually. And John, I read yours, and And you're so hung up on the state that you said yes because you were afraid the state had something to do with it. I just, anyways, so then I needed to just, and in your motion, you say that the homeowner is gonna be responsible for connection, maintenance costs, and associated costs. Well, legally, a resident is only responsible from the curb box to his house, and that's it. That's all his responsibility is. Everything else is ours. And maybe Mr. McHugh is gonna pay some of our maintenance, but if he leaves in 2 years, you can better believe that no other resident is gonna pay the town's responsibility, pay the town's part. It's our responsibility once we hook up. And then, do you have a written opinion from the town attorney on hooking up a resident, or is it just all verbally?
No.
Well, it was suggested to me that you get a written opinion from the attorney. And then my last question is this, and it's for Selectman McHugh. Are you related to Mr. McHugh? Are you related to?
I believe you know the answer to that. He's my ex-father-in-law.
Okay, so then, do you think, in my opinion, I would have recused myself from voting?
Fair enough.
That's all. I'm really disappointed because coming down the road, it's gonna affect us. It's gonna affect us and we're gonna pay for it. All of us are gonna pay for it for one person who's not even in a hardship, who can dig a well, he has permission to dig a well, and we're saying, yep, hook up to our system, that we're not equipped to do anything with. So I wanted to voice my opinion.
Anyone else present to speak? Okay. So correspondence, there is a list of correspondence in your packet. I have an additional item to share with you, and I'd like to copy for each of you. This came in, this one, no, this came in at 4:02 this afternoon, so it is by no means been read through. Last week, you may or may not have seen the governor give a press conference saying that there were some banks that were going to step up to offer loans to federal employees that were affected by the shutdown. In that, he gave some direction to the towns that said, you should defer any tax payments. It's easier said than done. There's a process in which it has to happen, so that certainly got tax collectors around the states who said exactly what we had said. It's nice that you want to do that, but it just doesn't work quite that way. So what this says is that as of today, the House and the Senate passed HB 5765, establishing a loan program and a municipal option provision to establish a program to defer the due date of specific property taxes owned by affected employees. Again, I haven't had the opportunity to read through the entire thing. What it does give is the municipality's legislative body may vote to establish the program, or if the legislative body is a town meeting, it's Board of Selectmen. So that would be us if we were deciding to implement this program. I'm not suggesting we do that tonight. We'd have to read through this and see what it is. I can tell you that up to this point, Lisa has and I have been communicating on this since the information came from the governor. We so far have not had anyone reach out to us from our town as a resident that is a federal employee. That's not to say we don't have some, but we have had no one come forth to us in any way to discuss the issue. So if we want to take up looking at establishing this program, I think there was some vague language that talks about that it only lasts as long as the shutdown lasts, and so it needs a lot more reading into it before I think we could maybe consider putting it on here to discuss. But what, it talks about what would happen after they're not eligible for. This is a brief synopsis. This is a copy of the bill, word for word, which was attached, so you copy that and we can take a look at it. But I find it interesting that for this one particular, and they did put in that provision that the Board of Selectmen could kind of skirt around the legislative body, and I'm not sure I'm not sure that's a great idea. But it's there, and so if you get a chance, take a look at it.
Pretty much managed to read through what was sitting here. State of Connecticut, which according to its laws is totally pitiless and ruthless for people who can't pay their taxes. No hardship is enough to excuse you not paying your taxes. We'll throw you out in the street unless you're losing a month's pay because the president of the Congress are having a little tiff, in which case we're gonna, I just.
Well, I mean, it also says we have to determine what the eligibility is.
Well, I
So
understand that.
we're in no place to determine what that is, so it's just, it's a communication that came in late, so we just wanted you all to have a look at it. We could further take a look at it. All right, so status report, the front steps are open.
Yeah.
This was a CIP project that started before we started. How long you had that on CIP?
Couple years.
So it took a bit to get up there, and then it took much longer than we would have hoped for it to come to fruition. So the rails that had to be fabricated were done last week, and the fabricators were here 4 out of 5 days working on them. So it hurt me a little bit this morning to chip at some of that very thick ice and put anything down on such pristine concrete. So we're hoping in the next day or so to have the temporary ramp removed. Right now the orange cones are up so that people wouldn't use it regularly. That door is back to locked. They'll move the cones and unlock it when the food pantry is open so that people could still come in. They could come in the front doors if they wanted, but they could still use that entrance. So there's still a little bit of anonymity there. And then we'll put the railing that they took down back up, and it will go back to the entrance in which it was before. So thank everyone for their patience on that particular item. The Public Works Director position, we are starting interviews soon. So we received 31 now applications. So we have a hiring committee, and we will be meeting on Friday, so you'll notice that as our Board of Selectmen's meeting, and then set dates for interviews from there, and hope to move forward with that. They spent the last several days clearing snow and ice. So I think temporarily did it was not an easy storm for the first storm of the year. All right. New business, there are several tax refunds. So I would motion to refund CoreLogic Wagner.
That just came in, sorry.
This one did?
Yeah.
Oh, an overpayment for $2,848.77. You don't have that one?
Don't have it, okay.
Today, so she didn't.
Okay,
That was that one.
I'll second.
Seconded by John, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I move to refund American Towers LLC Connecticut a certificate of correction for $722.16.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I move to refund CCAP Auto Lease LTD a certificate of correction in the amount of $47.99.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Move to refund CCAP Auto Lease LTD a certificate of correction for $144.91.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And move to refund Nissan Infiniti LT a certificate of correction in the amount of $481.74.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Move to refund Honda Leaf Trust a certificate of correction, the amount of $187.97.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. So the next item was the letter we received, or discussion about core testing on our town assets based on the letter we received from the Board of Finance. So the Board of Finance, at their December 20th meeting, said our board is concerned with several town buildings and bridges since 1983 may contain pyrite, exposing us to an unknown potential financial risk. They cite the library, the senior center, the salt shed, several bridges around town. We therefore recommend the Board of Selectmen make provisions to test the town's physical assets that were constructed since 1983 for the presence of the mineral pyrite as soon as administratively possible. This will allow the town to better understand the risk before us and prepare plans for them in our CIP process. So this discussion came about from two things. Christina had sent us a letter the same day when we received it to talk about her concerns, and then they acted based on that. A lot of this came after the Birch Grove School in Talland. Information came out saying that they are now suffering from a crumbling foundation, and that building was built in 1999. So they're making plans for that with residential. The way residential structures are handled as opposed to commercial is very different. It's not as simple as lifting the building up and replacing the foundation in most parts. The entire building would be gone and start over, and that's where they're at, Talland. And they started planning for that. There's much more detailed information than the very quick synopsis on Birch Grove. It was a very detailed process. So what I propose to CIP is that we start with some funding for testing our buildings. And so we put in a request for $30,000 this year, and that was for $5,000 for 6 tests. That was, we've set nothing in place. It was to get something into CIP as we were starting the process based on the time the letters came to us, and we acted rather quickly, and what those tests look like. So we need to decide how we should move forward. We're working on a list of bridges around town. The buildings are easier to pinpoint. So, and I think what most people think of is the public library and senior center. They also mentioned senior housing. We don't own the buildings over there. We lease the land. And so the cost in those buildings, I think the responsibility to communicate with them would be one thing, but it's basically sharing information. The buildings, both Button Hill and Willington Woods, do not belong to the town. The land is what belongs to the town. So that's listed, senior housing is listed in the letter from Board of Finance, but I would argue that the cost of those facilities would not be on the town.
Who would the cost be on? I mean, I think this is a very good idea. I think it's necessary.
It would be access, so that's your own.
But, you know, I really don't want to get into a little contest here over, no, it's your problem, no, it's my problem, and all that.
Well, I don't want to get into a debate about it, but we don't own the facilities. We didn't build the facilities. We lease the land. The town leased the land to someone else to put buildings on them. So the assumption by not clearly here on the Board of Finance, but by others, is that they belong to us. The senior center happens to be in the middle of 2 facilities that do not belong to the town. We lease the land in which they put the buildings. So I would say that the cost for repairing and or replacing would be on the owner of the building. We are not the owner of the building.
As long as we are not right now replacing anything.
But we wouldn't be
Testing.
I would not suggest that we test on them. I'd say share information, share the suggestions the same as they came to us. But I would encourage them to have those facilities looked at, but they're their facilities.
If we contract with some entity to do all this testing, we might want to invite them to join us and pay for their share and be in on that same contract, though.
We could have that discussion, sure. But essentially the funds would have to come from,
Wouldn't have to come, I understand, Max, I
From a
understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that it's something that probably needs to be done just as much as we need to do
absolutely.
it. And we
But-
need to encourage them to do it.
Right, I would be hesitant to say we would do it on our own, because then could we be taking responsibility for something if we went out on our own? And I wouldn't want to put that burden on the town, because the buildings don't belong to the town. They're not town facilities, they're not maintained by the town. Not even the plowing, we do their own everything. Randy?
Well, in a residential situation, one gets reimbursed the $400 for a visual inspection. To a certain extent, this might be a peace of mind step for them to suggest to them, they go ahead and do that, it's only $400, and they'll get the money back.
I don't,
But I don't know if they're eligible for the program.
they don't own it, they rent. So the owner has access. So the individual living in those units, so at Button Hill, we're talking about individual units, and there are multiple individuals in them, so it's not even like a condo, they don't own it, any portion of it.
More like an apartment, really.
Yes,
You know how that works in a condo situation?
It's all different, every condo
Yeah.
is very different.
and there's ownership in the condo, so I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
I think
there's
it
no
would work,
ownership
there's
at
no
all.
ownership by the residents that live in these facilities at all, so.
Yeah, the statute's pretty specific.
Mhm.
Okay.
So, if they did own it, I would, say that would give them, they'd be on a different playing field. But,
I do think the peace of mind thing could be an issue, though. They're gonna be worried.
absolutely. So, it's at us to determine where we go from here and how we want to proceed. Their guidance was to test for the presence as soon as administratively possible. So we can start with visual testing. Again, all of that is at a cost. But it's a small amount to give us the information we need to move forward. So it's necessary to do the different testing pieces. So if we start with the visual, determine where we go from there, and if we need the core test right away, I'd argue when we went to CIP that we have the funds in the event we need them. I'd rather us have them and not use them to carry over than we need to do the core test and we didn't plan for it.
So, and others probably have a little bit more experience with this than I do
Yeah.
in terms of the visual test. So the visual test sort of can rule something in to if it's sort of at an extreme level, but it absolutely cannot rule anything out.
No.
Right, so it's not like a
Right.
visual test can tell you you don't
No.
have it. It can just tell you, that's a very bad looking crack, you need to get the
Right.
core test.
You have something now that
Right.
probably needs needs mitigation, as opposed to, we're not seeing any signs yet, it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be some.
And-
So we have one of the concrete queens among us.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it also can set a benchmark, so
Mhm.
maybe there's a tiny crack this year and it would be documented, and then do it again 2 years from now and see how much it grew, and then you would know there's some rate of degradation happening that might be fast or slow, or, who knows, but it's just a good data point to get sooner than later.
and we can't ignore it. I think these have been concerns. A couple of these buildings have been concerns with people from the minute we heard the word pyrrhotite, and we need to move forward. And there had been lots of things bandied about early on that were definitely not in commercial buildings. Absolutely not, which I often thought was interesting to hear, because it's the same product. It may be installed in a different way, but concrete is concrete. So now we're seeing that that is in fact not true. It can be in commercial buildings. And we need to protect our assets and know where we're going forward. And I would say especially with the library, that they're looking at wanting to move forward with refinishing the unfinished portion of the basement, that before they move forward doing anything in that building, it would need to be tested.
And also, Eric, I think we know where the concrete came from.
We do know where-
Like, a lot of homeowners don't know where it
Right,
came from.
we know.
And I think it's in the records.
Yeah,
for
so we
most
can
buildings.
pinpoint the facilities and then do the research then to see where, because we have clear records where residents weren't required to, that stuff, but there are folders and files and papers on any item that happens out of this building as far as town facilities. So right now, again, the CIP request was 30,000 in year one, 30,000 in year two, 15 in the next 2 years. So in years 3 and 4. And so that is going forward into, with funds into the next budget season. The testing, core testing, can I ask those of you who are more up to date, does weather play a factor or time of year play a factor in when that could be done, or is that irrelevant?
It's irrelevant.
Okay, it is, okay. So it could be done in the winter time, and it's not like we have to wait for a specific time. That's good to know. So I would say we didn't plan for anything in this fiscal year, but maybe we think about if there are funds for, at the very least, the visual testing on these items in this fiscal year, that we look towards that and look towards the future. Christina had again sent us a letter basically advocating for the same thing. And while we're moving into budget season, it's a good time. As soon as we know we can start to plan our CIP, it may go from a simple request on testing to a lot more depending on what we see in any one building. Had any of them been looked at prior to this, Christina, that you know of?
No, and we were told that there was no way that there could be a problem, and I think,
Okay.
you know, this is playing out in other towns too,
Yes.
because everyone was under that impression.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Randy?
Can I just suggest we add our voice explain what we're doing with Capital Region Council of Government to probably Pauline, because it'd be interesting to know if other towns are pursuing the same strategy to find out if indeed they're going to have a problem with one of their assets. Like to, if other people are going down this road, because it is sort of budget time.
I know they're thinking about it, I don't know if they, and I know like Coventry tested their bridge that was falling apart. And I don't know if they got any results of that yet, but.
But if multiple towns are doing it, and you're talking about, we're a small town, we're gonna have to allocate 60,000 over 3 years, starts to suggest or provide an argument to the state of Connecticut. Small municipalities could use some help for this very
we're
quick
looking at,
testing.
our request was actually 90 over 4 years.
Yeah.
So, and that's just to tell us
Yeah.
where we can go forward. I mean, we're talking about
So,
some
Are you comfortable
significant
taking it
costs.
forward to CROG and letting them know what we're doing? Of course, it has to get by the Board of Finance, and I'm silent on that issue.
So, that's where our CIP request starts now. If you have some other thoughts on what else you'd like to see us doing.
Do we have an idea of the number of bridges?
I have a list of all the bridges. Carl was working on one. The first response was, I don't think that there are very many.
Surprise.
No, he
Right.
thinks that they're all prefab, like most of them are prefab,
Prefab.
so they're not.
Great.
Oh,
But I,
Not Ketchkus, I was there the
No.
day that was poured.
He did mention something
He
about
did.
Ketchkus, I think
Yeah,
that he's
'cause-
looking into.
so I
And
went-
bet Village Hill.
That's
yeah,
what mine
I
is.
have that one on my list. So I went through.
Every time I drive
yes.
over it.
And it's been, and there's been two iterations of Village Hill. So I did go through with Peggy, and I made a list of them, of all the possibilities. And those are the biggies that stood out to me, so we're working on the bridges, so we can have a clear-cut idea of those. And not just bridges, I mean, we can be looking at culverts, but those are typically prefab. So,
And what a lot of people say is, oh, you don't have to worry about the bridges because those are inspected every 4 years or whatever, but that's not really true. They're inspected
for different things.
for different things. They're just
Yeah.
inspected to see, is there scour happening, is there,
Right.
it's not, do they have
Soft
pyrotechnic?
degradation.
And we've seen some bridges, the one on Butter School, they say it wasn't a cause, but we know that they took the core from a different spot. So,
And who determined where the core came from?
I don't know. Somebody got it, but there was one particular spot that was the old part of the bridge, and there was the new part, and the new part was what was falling apart, and I think they took the core from the old part, so.
You know, they started this in 1983, apparently, is the year that everybody's using as the beginning year. And then if they say 20 years, that means this really started showing up in a lot of places around 2003. And yet we go all the way to 2019 or 2018 before it showed up in a commercial building, a school. So I'm wondering what happened in those other 16 years there, why it hadn't shown up in more
That
schools.
school was built in 1998.
Right. So that's 16 years after 1983, which means this house was built in 1983, it starts showing up in 2003.
It can.
There's no
There's no
time.
time frame.
Yeah, I know, I'm
People have
just,
put an estimated time, but
Right.
that's all that it is. There
but
was something in
it can,
2014.
yes, I understand that. And just as the school could have shown up 5 years earlier or 5 years later, what I'm saying is no commercial buildings in that, between 2003 and 2018, and all that time when houses are falling apart, no commercial buildings showed up until now this
They
Right.
did, though.
school.
They did, they were on the news
Right.
back in 2015,
Right.
the Dance Express in Holland, and there's some other places, but they were told.
Can't be,
It can't
can't
be,
be,
and,
but it did can.
but it was.
Well, once the school shows up, it's gonna be there, I'm sure.
And
Okay,
then the school was cracking for years
Right.
before, they
Right.
knew something was going on, they didn't know
They just
what it
didn't know it was
was.
this, and
They would probably thought it was settling tax, just like all the homeowners thought.
as this gets bigger, they moved forward with it. There's been work on it for a long time, it didn't just happen. When we see this report, there's a lot of work that,
There's a fire
tells you.
department too that has it.
So,
Yeah, it's not that it wasn't happening, it's that the dots weren't all connected and the picture wasn't all put together. The puzzle pieces were all scattered.
and there was clear verbiage as to whether or not it could possibly be. And so you look for other possibilities, but that has turned out to be inaccurate, which I don't know that many are surprised by. So what's frustrating is that it's taken that long to come to fruition, so. But now that we know, we can't unknow something, and it's our responsibility to move forward and see what we can do to determine what's happening with our buildings, so that then we can plan for them. Because if we don't have money for the little things, we certainly are prepared for these large projects all to come in a similar timeframe, so we have to plan for them. So we hate to see our, everything that's happened in this town, the senior center, and the public library suddenly crumble around us, right in the pond, so. All right, so you'll see that CIP process, and then we'll start working on a plan going forward. I'll bring you some.
because again, what they say, as soon as administratively possible. I agree on this one.
Right, I just found that as soon as administratively possible, interesting terms, I thought, what does that mean? There's, if they were expecting us to do A, B, and C, and they hold the first strings. So we could easily say, let's test them all, but where the funds come from,
Right.
is a very different story. Do we go back to now the Board of Finance and said we determined very quickly that we want money this year, and now we're coming, we didn't budget for, so now I'm coming back to you and asking you for $60,000, not in CIP, but now. So we're trying, I tried to take the responsible path and put it inside CIP for 2 years and start there. But again, we used the number $5,000 for a number of buildings. But if we start with the visual, we could be looking at a lesser cost. And those were just estimates. Again, there was a couple day turnaround between the letter received from the Board of Finance and the CIP request done. So I won't say it was completely thought out exactly what testing and where it was going to go, where it was going to happen like a normal CIP request would go in. This was, let's get the request in so we can start talking about the money. And now we need to work out the details of a plan. All right, old business. So last meeting, we voted so that Ashford could then vote to accept the increase, the addendum from Cato Rock, for the Cato Rocks Brownfields by BL Companies. After we met, they met, and they did not sign.
Okay.
They voted against it.
They're actually meeting
They're
tonight,
meeting,
right
they
now,
meet the same times we do.
with
So-
BL companies to discuss the proposal and with the service agreement and then the extra $30,000.
So we go in on this together, it's in Ashford's name,
Yeah.
so,
Did they give information as to why, since initially when it was sent over?
Christine came and spoke
Yeah,
last
so,
week, but
so what she said was the first selectman in Ashford, they had narrowed it down to two companies, and actually even before that, I'm sorry, they had narrowed it down, and they were looking at all the proposals, and these two companies that they did look at came in
And they're-
substantially lower than a couple of the other companies that were up here. And Mike Zambo was the first selectman. Do you mind if I talk first?
well, Mike's concern was that they had come in with this low number, then they were gonna come back, and they knew the scope of the work going in. They knew the amount of documents, and a lot of the increase was for document review. And so when Mike made his vote going into this, those are one of the concerns, even when he went, even going with BL companies, this was one of his concerns, was that then they were gonna come back for more money, which then they did. So, although the money was still within the grant, we could use that towards further steps in this process if it weren't used for this. So now they're meeting with BL tonight, so I almost wish it could have been a meeting we could have been part of, because we were part of the discussion and choosing the company.
And it's hard for us to make decisions if we're not in any of the loop
Correct.
process, so if we're getting information from them,
And
vote
the
on
information
this.
from that is, it's a formality, and it's really, our
Yeah.
vote doesn't
it's so
really
frustrating.
mean anything. We've been in lockstep up until this point because we've been in the whole process together, so now they're at the point where the correspondence is with them and not with us.
Yeah.
So there's nothing for us to do tonight,
I can do
except
nothing.
wait until they have a conversation and go forward. So we can't have meetings on the same night. All right, so good and welfare. I regret to inform you that we received a resignation today from Eileen Smith, who, yes, she sadly is ready to be retired. She retired from the state and then took the job as the administrative assistant in Public Works. And she was ready to leave us sooner, but in lieu of a director this summer, she stayed on a little bit longer. And I can tell you from our discussions, it wasn't an easy decision for her to make, but she's ready to be retired and to be able to enjoy retirement. So I sadly accepted that resignation today, so we will be hiring our public works administrative assistant. And so her last day will be February 6th, which is just over 2 weeks, a day over 2 weeks. All right, that's all I have. Any other anything for the welfare?
I'm glad to see Dollar General has finally admitted that they're, well, again, they actually put a sign up there.
Oh, did they?
They did put a sign.
Oh, I missed it. I drove by there twice.
Yeah, I figured they applied for signs, they might as well start saying it's Dollar General. So, there's a lot of work happening now, there's a lot of stone to be removed, a lot of stone. Apparently, that's what we cultivate here in Wellington, is rocks.
I planted some stone seeds.
Yeah,
They caught.
they used to bury them back in the day. Just- I mean, everything. So if that's the worst thing they found, there were some stones.
And the old gas station is finally
The
gone.
old gas station, I came to work and went that way one morning, one Friday, and there it was in all its glory. And when I took my son to work next door at 4:30, I said, something is missing here. And there was no building, so I know there are probably some in town that have concerns about the businesses going there, but seeing that space revitalized, I think is really, it's a good thing, it's not a bad thing. I think people might have concerns about a type of business and how exactly that comes to fruition. And there's a process, and as long as they follow all of the steps, they're not denied opening a business in town. And I know that people will support it once it is in place. So I don't think there's much to worry about. Again, it's better than seeing a rundown, dilapidated building when you first drive into town, and for most people, that's their first sighting in Wellington, is when you come across that bridge. So it'll just be nice to see something there that's doing well. So now we need someone to love Phelps Way. Some love. All right, anything else? I'll move to adjourn at 7:17.